Hey guys, welcome to episode 9 of the VoiceOver Roadmap podcast. On today's show, we have a guest co-host, Joe Zieja. Joe is a professional voiceover talent located in LA, and he has voiced a lot of commercial work as well as some animation and video game projects. Joe is also a top booking talent on online casting sites. Before we jump into the episode, a quick reminder, if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode of the show, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And if you want to check out the show notes for this episode with links to everything that Joe and myself talk about, you can find those at voiceoverroadmap.com/009. And if you like the show, please remember to leave a rating and review on iTunes. And you could also check out the show on YouTube and on the VoiceOver Roadmap website. So let's jump into episode 9 with guest co-host Joe Zieja. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Hey, Mike.
Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you coming on the show. I got a lot of good questions from the audience and some questions of my own. So really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So before we jump into all the questions, I just want to start out with a little bit about you and introduce you to people who might not be familiar with you or your work. So can you just talk a little bit give us a little brief overview of your background and also how you initially got into VO at the very beginning?
Sure, yeah, definitely. My name is Joe Zieja. Yeah, it's pronounced just like zebra, except not really. So everyone always asks me that as like the first question. I got into VO sort of almost as an accident. I was actually in the Air Force for most of my adult life. And after I had left the Air Force, I was working for the government for a little bit. And one Saturday I was working on reserve duty and I was talking to a friend of mine on Google Chat. And I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to try voiceover. And actually I said voice acting, like thinking, anime, cartoons, video games, stuff like that. And he was like, well, there's this website called voices.com that one of my old companies used to hire voiceover artists for corporate stuff. Why don't you check it out? So I did. I had some equipment from, my hobbyist musician days. And I laid down something. I actually booked the first thing I ever auditioned for, which was a little panda bear speaking Arabic to children. It was sort of like, I actually don't know if it was English as a second language or Arabic as a second language, but it was, basic stuff about like counting from 1 to 20, saying a few things, shapes and colors. And I had enough Arabic language experience to cover that.
Yeah.
Just put on a funny voice.
That came in handy.
Yeah, it did come in handy. And it was kind of like, oh, wow, someone paid me for that. That was pretty cool. Can I do that again? So I just sort of dove headfirst into the online casting realm to start. I started auditioning for whatever I could come up with. Even if I didn't think I fit, I just started talking to a microphone as often as I could with as many different job types as I could. And it really just kind of snowballed. Within about 8 months, I was talking to my government job and saying, hey, either I need to go part-time or I need to quit because I'm doing better as a voice actor. And I can't lead both lives anymore because it was becoming extremely stressful. I was working 16 hours a day. We just had our first kid. It was nuts.
Yeah.
So they created a position for me to stay half-time for the next 8 months or so. And then in October of 2014, I left the government world behind. About 8 months after that, I guess everything seems to come in 8-month spurts. I moved to Los Angeles to kind of hunt the big game because I was still, everything was out of my home studio, which I then built up using all the money that I had made as a voice actor while I had a steady job. And I moved to LA to hunt the big gigs, and here I am.
Awesome. So you didn't really have any acting experience, whether stage experience or anything like that beforehand?
Not even remotely.
Yeah. That's funny. I have a pretty similar background to you. I mean, I also started on voices.com. I had a music background, so I had the home studio. So that was nice because there wasn't that obstacle of, I got to go spend a couple $100 and get a mic and get an interface and maybe a new computer. Same thing. I just kind of started auditioning, got a job that covered that, first month. And I was like, all right, maybe let's try it another month. And got a job that covered that month. And then, things snowball from there when you're putting yourself out there and auditioning. And like you, I also, I didn't have much of an acting background. So that was, I guess, a crutch at the beginning, and something that I had to get better at. And then what did you do? Did you go the coaching route? Did you sort of just self-teach, self-educate online with books? How did you approach that?
It was mostly learning by experience, which, there's, that could go good and bad, if you establish bad habits and stuff like that. But I didn't do any coaching for the first year or so, at least. Really, not until like mid 2015. I don't think I started looking at particular coaches when I was trying to book the bigger gigs. I was trying to get into national commercials and video games and stuff like that. J. Michael Collins took me under his wing with a little bit of business sense, which was great. But we never had any coaching per se. Every once in a while, I'd send somebody an MP3 or something. Be like, hey, how does this sound? Am I getting this correct? And I had all kinds of help establishing the right way to do things. I had contacted George Whittam at Edge Studio to help me kind of fine tune the EQ and compression so I could have something to use. And J. Michael Collins helped me out with the business sense. I eventually hooked up with a manager that I was with for a while, who kind of helped me out with the who's who and here's how you actually build a traditional career, even though you're not really in a traditional mode anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so got some kind of direction from these people to push you and, make sure you're going on the right path, and then took things yourself and, put in the time. That's great.
Yeah.
Did you, so do you have any sort of big moments or milestones that stand out from any time really, from the beginning of your career to now, whether it be a big job or just a big step you took or something that was really a big inflection point for you?
You kind of remember I remember booking my first series of national commercials for the Golf Channel.
Nice. Yeah, cool.
Back in 2014 or 2015. And when I got to LA 8 months after, let's say maybe 10 months after I got to LA, I ended up booking the role of Fox McCloud in the Nintendo Star Fox anime, which was, I don't know if you're a gamer, but if you say Fox McCloud to anybody that, grew up with a Nintendo, they kind of freak out.
Yeah, I had this game, the N64 game. I remember it.
Yeah, okay. So when someone tells you you're playing Fox McCloud, you kind of lose your stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a big moment for me. There have been some other things that I have had the opportunity to work on within the last 6 months or so that I can't talk about yet because games have long production cycles. But there are a couple where I'm still not totally convinced that they meant to hire me. Like they certainly, no, you certainly aren't looking for Joe Zieja to play that iconic role. You can't be serious. So I don't think I'll believe it until I see my name in the credits.
That's awesome. So yeah, so character kind of stuff, games and animation, that's kind of the thing that as a voiceover talent, you kind of wanted to cast a wide net and do different kinds of work, but you like doing, would you say that that's top of your list for the kind of work that you love getting?
Yeah, it's by far the most fun. It's also tends to be the most difficult and least lucrative. But there's a creative payoff that you get when you are able to act characters and tell stories, and the more you do it, the more you see feedback from people about how you changed either their point of view or even their day. You probably won't do that with a 2-minute web video about a new app, but you certainly can do it in an anime series, or a video game or a cartoon, or those things can have some very powerful effects on the people that watch them, and that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. They play a bigger role in people's lives than just some commercial that they're going to see once, twice, and move on. Something that's a game or that's awesome. So so let's move on to some questions, starting with my own that I have for you. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I read somewhere that you do, I think the number was around 80 auditions per day, and maybe that's changed, so you'll correct me. But is that still accurate? And is that a good indication of about how much you audition on average? I'm sure not every day is exactly the same, but is that a rough average?
I would say that it used to be that way just based on the fact that, I used two main online casting sites to cultivate clients and get new work, and voices.com and voice123. Each of them has changed the way that they operate over the last couple of years, often resulting in sort of stovepiping the amount of auditions I receive. So now the opportunities don't exist for me to audition up to 8 times a day. I'd say I'm probably closer to 40 now based on all that stuff. And then, my agent Atlas here in LA sends me a ton of stuff every day now that I'm getting to read on. So, I might read 5 to 10 times a day for them. And yeah, it's so yes, I'd still audition a lot. And I was remarking to somebody the other day that it's amazing that as voice actors, the vast majority of our time is unpaid labor.
Yeah,
all we do is audition, and the jobs take such little time compared to how much time you spend auditioning.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I audition an awful lot. That was the way I tackled the industry. I decided that I was just I had found a way to establish a good workflow. I became a very competent reader. Do most things in one take. And not worry over editing and fretting. And is my performance perfect for this explainer video for T-shirts? Or try not to inject a $10 million advertising mentality into a $400 production.
Mm-hmm.
And that saved me some time.
Yeah, no, that's super impressive. Even 40 a day, I mean, 80 a day too is crazy. But can you take us through your process a little bit? I guess in terms of starting with, how do you discern between this is an audition that I should actually audition for, or this is something I should pass on? And then like, how do you actually record, edit, and do it? I'm assuming pretty quickly if you're doing 40 to 80 a day. So can you just like walk us through a little bit of your process, your audition stage of your day?
Sure. It all kind of depends on where I'm sourcing the audition from, right?
Okay.
So if I'm getting auditions from my agents, particularly in the LA or New York markets, I know that those auditions are for large, big paying jobs that require a lot of nuance.
Mm-hmm.
The people that write a 30-second commercial for Coca-Cola, in many cases, their advertising budget is in the tens of millions.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration. It's people spend an incredible amount of time and effort coming up with just the right pictures, just the right words, and they have very specific requirements for you to deliver that. You're the messenger for that tens of millions of dollars of ad revenue or ad budget. So yeah, you got to spend some more time trying to figure out, what their message is, who the audience is, and subtext looking behind it, et cetera. And the same thing goes with bigger AAA video games or network animation. There are complex stories being told there with complex characters, often who have pages and pages and pages of backstory. Somebody poured their life into that character, and you need to, do the work and give the creation of that character some respect in how much time you put into it. So, those pretty much, if I'm getting those from my agents, I don't pass, because their job is to figure out, is this something Joe would be good at?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear his take on it. So I'm not gonna pass. I very rarely pass on anything from my agents unless there's either a conflict, like I have a spot already running in the same category.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or if it's a non-union job, and maybe either they're not paying attention to the budget or whatever, and they, the budget doesn't make sense for a non-union all buyout stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is becoming more prevalent.
Yeah.
I'm finding myself passing on it more often.
Cool. And then what about so from casting sites, do you just take a quick look at the specs? Do you go by young adult, middle-aged, senior? What's your sort of process there?
Well, the websites kind of do a little bit of the work for you, in that if you define yourself as being of a certain age and voice quality, they're not going to give you a 60-year-old grumbly man. So there's a little bit of automation that eases up the process there.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, if I'm going through casting sites, I am immediately slashing auditions based on their budget.
Okay.
And then I'll slash another round based on their usage and budget. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do anything below a certain price point, and I'm certainly not going to do a national commercial for $300.
Sure.
And that's because that's ridiculous. Don't do that.
You
voice
see them.
actors.
You
Don't
see them
do
on
that.
there, though. Yep, you see them.
If you're listening to this, don't do it.
Yeah, no, that is nuts. And you do see it. Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So yeah, but everything else, especially if it stretches my comfort zone a little bit, that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Online casting sites are the best places to make incredible mistakes, because there's so much. The volume is so huge. If you screw up 5% of your auditions,
Yeah.
who cares?
There's so many more
if you
coming.
do something completely off spec, or you decide to take it in a completely different direction, who cares?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, I mean, they're going to keep coming in. So there's a nice flow of them. And so when you're actually recording them, are you sort of batching things and saying, all right, let me get in front of the mic, I'll knock out 10, 15, 20, or do you just all day, when they're coming in, are you sort of jumping on them quickly? All right, let me do this one, get it out, and then go back to whatever I was doing and kind of handle it that way?
Every single workflow and time management expert on the planet will tell you to batch your tasks.
Okay.
Always batch your tasks. There is no reason, especially for I am not going to run back to my microphone for a $300 pay-to-play
Mm-hmm.
audition that pops up. If it goes away, fine. There's going to be 60 others that come in over the course of a week. So it also it informs your reads too. If you're acting all panicked and desperate about the fact that you have to run out to do this tiny audition, you're going to sound panicked and desperate. It'll come through. So yes, one of the most powerful things I think I do from my workflow perspective is task batching.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah. Now I'm at a point now where I hired a brilliant assistant almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago now. And she basically, other than the casting sites, which, she can't really inject herself into that workflow in any way that makes sense. But I don't even look at my email anymore. All these jobs and requests, personal requests will come in, edit requests, job requests, whatever. And she will rack and stack them and put them in a queue for me. So now my job is I walk into the booth, I read everything down, I send everything off, and I walk away.
That's great.
And I do it all at the same time. If it's not in there and I'll do different runs, a couple times a day. And if it's not in there when I'm done, then it doesn't get read until the next time I go there. Because most people don't need an hour, I need this within 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, then,
yeah, they'll stress that and urgent. Yeah. They appreciate it, but like, yeah, it's not urgent necessarily. So she's doing your editing for you, right? On those projects?
She does not do my editing. I do have an editor a freelance editor that I hire when I do e-learning stuff. If I need to split something into 40 files or whatever, and I'm, have him take out all my breaths and click errors, and then I'll send that off to the client. Gotcha.
Yeah, so basically she's like, just organizing your workload for the day. You don't have to comb through emails, answer this,
she's
answer
my
that.
Personal assistant, not necessarily my audio editor or whatever.
Okay, so your workflow for casting site auditions, agency auditions, you're handling both, obviously stepping in front of the mic and recording, and the editing and submission of those all yourself, right?
And I will typically read everything that's in my queue before I will step out of the booth, and then mix down everything that's in my queue, and then I will send everything that's in my queue. So I'm batching similar tasks. I will not read, mix down, and send, read, mix down, send.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm saying I'll wake up in the morning, I'll comb through whatever's there, and then, I'll, whatever it is, 10, 12, 15, I'll do those, record them all, edit them all, submit them all. And then, it's on to the next batch later in the day. Occasionally, I'll, jump in front of the mic for a one job if it's something from an agent that's really great and, I'm the perfect specs for it, something like that. But yeah, like you said, I'm not going to just go, especially if I'm in the middle of something, like working on another project or whatever it is, to sort of just, cut things and just jump for a very small job or something that's not a perfect fit. I don't think it's super necessary or makes a ton of sense.
Right.
But that's great. So it sort of leads in pretty well to my next question, which is that as a voiceover talent, you're an entrepreneur and you are working for yourself and you're making your own schedule and deciding what needs to get done and when it needs to get done. So what are some ways that you sort of manage your time? And I know that you're also an author and that you do some music composition and you have a family and outside hobbies. So how do you specifically balance things and make sure that you're putting the appropriate amount of time where it needs to be so that you can, be successful in all these things? And I know you have an assistant, so that's going to play into it. But what are some other things that you do?
Yeah, to be completely honest with you, that balance is one of the most difficult things that I struggle with daily. Mm-hmm. I can't always give all of myself to any particular area, and figuring out when to give me to what can be really tough.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've kind of got the VO thing down to kind of a mad scientist thing where I can accomplish a lot of the auditions and stuff within a small time frame. Mm-hmm. If I don't get sent out to do a gig at a studio or audition at a specific place, I may only be in the booth for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day or so. A lot of that burden is taken up by my assistant sorting out my emails and queuing things up for me, which is great. I eventually got the idea to hire an assistant after reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, mm-hmm. which if you've never read it, it will change the way you think about your business and what is important for you to concentrate on and what is not important for you to concentrate on.
Yeah, a lot of automation and outsourcing and that kind of stuff, right?
Automation, outsourcing, and just understanding the difference between something that's important and something that's urgent. Everything's important, but almost nothing is urgent. Almost nothing requires you to break whatever you're doing and step away to do something else.
Right.
For the most part, as far as writing goes, we just had our second child, so my schedule kind of got thrown to the wind.
Sure.
But for the most part, I was writing for 1 to 2 hours every morning before the real voiceover day kicked off. So that's where I kind of fit that in, and I just kind of drop things in as I can.
So you don't really rigidly schedule, like you just said when you were writing in the morning. Did you have on your calendar, okay, every morning I'm up, 9 o'clock, 9:30 I'm writing for 2 hours? Was it like that?
Not
or
necessarily.
Just okay.
I've tried different ways to structure my time because I was always used to, as a government employee, you have structure, you clock in and you clock out, mm-hmm. and everything in between those two times is considered work. sometimes to the detriment of the taxpayer. But, a couple of times I was like, I don't feel very focused. All right, so I'm going to do voiceover run 1 from 10 to 11. I'm going to write from 9 to 11 or whatever, and I'm going to go to the gym from 3 to 4. And that was like I structured my whole day like that.
Yeah.
But as a freelancer, it doesn't necessarily work because, all it takes is one call from your agent being like, hey, you got to get down to Kalmanson for an audition here at 2:00.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be like, sorry, that's my gym time.
Yeah.
I'll be doing squats. That's that's not acceptable. So you have to maintain your flexibility.
Yeah,
and
no, I've found the same thing. I've tried that same thing and had the exact same experience.
Yeah. And it adapts at different phases of my life and of my career. I've changed things around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've definitely tried that as well. Just saying like, all right, from this time to this time, I'm doing this, that, and then it feels nice when you can stick to it for a little bit because it's like, wow, look, I planned this perfect day where by the end of it, if I stick to it, I'd get A, B, C, and D done, and if I stick to it, look, I got A, B, C, and D done. But like you said, as a freelancer, things are going to pop up, and even further than that, as a voiceover freelancer, I think there's other sorts of freelance work that maybe does lend itself a little bit better to having some sort of scheduled blocks for your day. But voiceover, it does make it tough because you do got to be flexible. And like you said, you might get an audition or something.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a graphics designer and all of my work was from my house and I never really had to answer to anybody or go anywhere or do anything, then I'm sure I could structure, I'm going to draw from this time or I'm going to design from this time. But there's always, I have to be on the phone with somebody, even for my home studio for a phone patch or an ISDN session or whatever, or travel. So, I don't have the freedom to always structure everything.
Yeah. So I think it's maybe something worth experimenting with from time to time and seeing if you can, but experimenting with it and, keeping in mind that, okay, I'm going to schedule my day, but like scheduling some flex time or something in there because you got to kind of anticipate that, hey, I'm likely going to get an email. I'm likely going to get an audition. I'm likely going to get a job or something that's going to take me out of this schedule for a bit.
Right.
But that's great. And how much do you know, like if you had a ballpark it, about how much time would you say you spend auditioning on either like a daily or weekly basis? Do you kind of know like hours wise?
I would say maybe an hour and a half a day, 2 hours.
Okay. And
maybe,
you can get,
I used to time it. I don't remember what it was. But
and you could do your 40 or so in that time?
Sure.
You could pretty much knock them out. Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's really fast, like time per audition ratio. Because I know I actually spoke with J. Michael Collins about the same thing, and I think his number was somewhere around 5 minutes for at least for casting site auditions.
Per audition?
Per audition, he says he tries not to go over 5 minutes tops.
Yeah, I try not to go over a minute if I can manage it.
That's amazing. Yeah. So and that includes recording and editing it.
Yeah, I mean, if I give him a 30-second read, it only takes 10 seconds to mark the file.
If you don't make mistakes, sure.
Down.
Yeah. So kind of being really great at cold reading and getting stuff in one take, obviously, I would assume.
That is definitely a skill for me, is I'm a very good cold reader.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, probably for people who aren't a good skill to get better at and to, read, read more stuff just off the cuff.
Read. I mean, like I've done over 30,000 auditions on casting sites in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of repetition.
Yeah, and you get better as you go, I would assume. Yeah. Absolutely. So, my last question for you is, you are currently a union talent, is that correct?
Technically, I'm financial core. So
okay,
that's
gotcha.
a special category it's called a fee-paying non-member. So I'm actually not eligible to go for a lot of like union events. Mm-hmm. I can't vote. I can't serve on the board. I can't go to like the voiceover lab, the whatever it's called, Don LaFontaine voiceover lab that's sponsored by SAG. So I do lose a little bit of benefits, but as a financial core member, it is legal for you to work on both union and non-union work.
Okay, yeah, and that's big, right? Because if you're somebody who started as non-union and you have a nice client base and you have, nice sources of income that are non-union, I think if you went full union, you would probably lose, technically lose that, right? You're not really supposed to be working non-union if you're a full union member.
Yeah, if you're a full union member, you are not supposed to work on non-union stuff. When I joined the union, based like even after the first year of being in the union, I would have taken like a 90% pay cut, just because the union work wasn't it just wasn't there for me.
Right.
I wasn't in LA yet. I wasn't making connections, and even now, full union stuff doesn't necessarily make up a huge part of my income.
So, yeah. So what
I would
was?
love it. I would love it to be there, but it
Yeah.
takes time, and FICOR allows me to kind of like make that transition rather than all of a sudden fire all of my clients, which
Right.
is not economically viable.
Yeah, it's a smoother transition from the non-union to the union world as opposed to just
Correct.
jumping all in and just losing everything. So was your decision behind doing that in the first place and just not staying non-union, was that because you're sort of, pursuing more of this work that's going to fall under union work, stuff like the animation and the video game and that kind of thing?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly why. I knew that if I was going to go to LA, like a lot of the LA work is union, particularly animation, and even to many extent now that the strike is over, thank God, the video game stuff. And the pay structure for union commercials is much more advantageous from an actor perspective. Although some non-union commercial companies are attempting to rectify that by employing the same kind of pricing structure. But yeah, there's no doubt that the union will remain the gatekeeper for larger, higher paying voiceover jobs.
Right. And if that's the route you want to go, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And as like a FICOR member, do you still get like health benefits and that sort of thing? Or is it just strictly you could work some union jobs and you can work non-union and that's it and that's all you're getting?
No, I do still get health benefits
Okay,
as long
that's
as
great,
as long as I qualify by earning enough of union money.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, okay, so there's some like, regulations and things there.
Yep.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Because I know that's a tricky thing for people. As they're going along in their career, most people, are going to obviously start non-union, and yeah, it's a tough decision. Which route do I want to go? And
It is,
yeah.
and it's a sensitive issue for a lot of people. There's a lot of like just really high passions when it comes to being a union or being a non-union member, working off the card, and a lot of people don't just say it. Like my opinion is, you got to do what's good for you. Is like you have to put food on the table. Okay.
Yeah.
You do what you have to do. And if you're going to work FICOR, or if you're going to work off the card, the great thing about the union is that it protects the rates of voiceover, right? It keeps the rates honest.
Yeah.
If you're going to go FICOR or if you're going to be non-union, the onus is now on you to protect the industry.
Exactly.
Don't work for crap rates.
No $300 national commercials.
Do not engage in broadcast buyouts. Protect yourself and be educated enough to protect yourself and protect the industry. Many of the non-union stuff I won't do unless it's at union scale or higher. And I protect myself and protect the industry, even if I'm working non-union projects.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So before we jump into our audience questions, I just want to speak a little bit about some of your other endeavors. So in addition to voiceover, you're also an author, and you have a trilogy of books, I believe, that you're working on. Can you just talk a little bit about your, yourself as an author and what these books are about?
Sure, yeah. Being an author was kind of an interesting thing for me. I always thought that my books were going to be the thing that took me out of, a day job. I had been writing seriously since like 2010. I published maybe a dozen short stories in various magazines and anthologies and stuff like that. And then around 2013, I ended up getting represented by an agency for one of my novels.
Nice.
Called Death Bear and the Snuggle of Doom. Which is exactly what it sounds like.
It's a kid's book?
No, it was a very ridiculous. It was like a zany screwball fantasy novel.
Oh, that's funny.
Because I had just got done writing this like super serious epic fantasy. Book, and like I didn't even submit it to any agents because I was like, this was such a slog. It was like 250,000 words, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna write something really stupid. And so I did. And it got picked up by by the biggest science fiction and fantasy agency in New York City.
Wow.
And it was too weird. We couldn't sell it to any publisher. And that was 2013. 2014, one of the publishers that really liked that book but couldn't sell the rest of the team on it came back to me and was like, hey, you obviously can write. You're obviously funny, and you were in the military. We're looking for somebody to write something that's a military science fiction that's funny. Could you pitch something? And I said, okay. I actually sold my first novel based on a pitch, which is a little backwards. But it worked out for me because the editor had seen my work before. So eventually what happened is I ended up selling a trilogy of these science fiction books to an imprint of Simon & Schuster. So now I'm under contract for 3 books. The first book is Mechanical Failure, which came out last June. Got compared to Terry Pratchett and Catch-22 and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is was pretty nice to hear. It's very, very loosely based on my own experiences in the military, only in that, like, many of the personalities and the weird situations that I extrapolate on were things that actually happened to me or people I knew.
Right.
I don't know. It's a ton of fun. It's so not serious. It's a way for me to kind of like lampoon the bureaucratic war machine of the United States military. I don't know. It's great. Second book is coming out this November, and then the third book comes out next year. And I get to narrate all of them. So I get to read.
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So actually, audiobook versions.
Mechanical Failure is up for 2 Voice Arts Awards this year. So
wow, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
There's
the author side.
That's all really, really cool. There'll be links in the show notes for you guys if you want to check those out. And so just another quick question about that. So were you, with that first book, were you sort of pitching it around to like publishers and stuff, or it just kind of, they came to you, they found you? How did that sort of work?
With the Death Bearer book?
Yeah, with that book.
So yeah, the way it goes in traditional publishing is that you'll pitch an agent, the agent will represent you, you'll sign with that agency, and then it's the agent's job to go use his connections at all the different publishers and say, hey, I've got this book, I think it's really great, here's blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
Will you buy it? So yeah, we pitched that to a ton of people, and we got a couple of nibbles, but nothing. I still think it'll get published someday, once maybe I'm a little more established and I'm not seen as such a risk, because it was goofy. Nobody writes screwball fantasy for the most part.
Yeah, and I mean, once the other books are out and they're successful, then they might want to take a second look. Cool.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's jump into our audience questions for this episode. And let's start with our performance question for the week, which comes from Lisa. And Lisa asks, what are some ways and some things I can do on my own without a coach to improve my performance abilities and skills as a talent? And I think this is a good question for both of us, because I think we both kind of did this. But let you take the first stab at it. What do you think?
Read and listen. I mean, like I said earlier, I have failed at voiceover over 30,000 times. But each of those 30,000 times educated me on something.
Mm-hmm.
It got me better cold reading. It got me understanding how to interpret a script. So read out loud. Get better at reading. Take a class in audio production.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what an EQ or a compressor is, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
You could transcribe stuff from national commercials and sort of like mimic that tone. I know a lot of people that get good at characters that way. Yeah, or you could join a workout group, but really, like, any way you can find to read copy and listen to other people reading copy to improve your taste, do it.
Yep. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is just do it as much as possible. I like that idea a lot, of just listening to real commercials that are out there, because these are people who are obviously booking high-level jobs. So listen, what are they doing? Because they're doing things right. You can sort of transcribe it, get the scripts, practice along, record yourself, listen back to yourself, hear what it sounds like when you're recording. And, and like Joe mentioned, you do have to sort of be an audio engineer, at least of a decent skill set. So, get comfortable with that stuff, practice that in the same way that you practice your performance. And, as you're selling your voice talent as a product, and part of that product is your actual audio quality. It's not just your performance skills. The performance is the biggest part of it, in my opinion. But, the audio quality definitely comes into play. Workout groups, there's a lot of forums and communities out there. Interact with other people who are a little bit more advanced than you are. Things like this, listen to a podcast, there's a lot of online self-education you can do, books, YouTube channels, that sort of things. Mock auditions could be great. We do that on the show from time to time, and Edge Studio does that. So those are a great way to sort of get some feedback on auditions. And just going back to our first point, just do it. Just do it as much as possible. Read as much as possible, record yourself as much as possible, listen as much as possible. And and I think that's all great ways to sort of take things further.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could read as much information you want about rock climbing, but if the first thing you do is try to climb El Capitan and Yosemite, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
So go do it, go do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope that helps, Lisa. Thank you so much for the question. And let's move on to our audio question, which this week comes from Roger. And Roger asks, once I set up a proper home studio and have a good sound, is it necessary to continue to review and update it? And if so, How often should I be doing this? And what sort of things do I look or listen for? So yeah, what's your take on that one?
I think there's a threshold of quality that once you pass, you should never change it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so for me, my chain is a Sennheiser MKH 416 into an Avalon 737 into a Focusrite, right? The 737 and the 416, the mic and preamp there are pretty much the industry standards. You walk into any studio in Los Angeles and they've probably got one and they're probably using it when they're recording you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Together, that's about $3,000 worth of stuff. In the grand scheme of things, not very expensive when you're talking about, a career.
Right.
While I was getting to this point, I tried a lot of other things that weren't as expensive. And so like I would book more work and then I would sort of change and then I would book more work and then I would change. And then I finally settled on, basically what everybody uses. That can cause problems if you're always updating stuff because a client will come back to you after 3 months and be like, I need a sentence of this. And you're like, oh crap, I don't have that microphone anymore.
Yeah.
And it becomes impossible to match it. And that can just get annoying. Also, I think, if you've got a solid sound, after that, what I said before, the threshold of quality, nobody cares. Nobody cares if they're like, the high end is a little sparkly when you do such and such. No one cares. No one cares.
Yeah.
Get something that sounds great and never touch it. I've been using the same preset EQ and compressor for 3 years.
And yeah, I mean, if you're not getting bad feedback from anybody, I mean, obviously if somebody's like, hey man, what's going on with this or that, and you're getting some bad feedback, for sure, you're going to look at it. But, it's a good sign if you've been going along for a little while and there is really like no news is good news. Like if, people aren't complaining about your audio quality and you're booking, then, that's a good sign and that you're probably doing some things right. If you're someone who's starting out and you've got not necessarily like cheap gear, but you've got, lower budget gear, I think in that case, it could be okay, maybe once a year or whatever, just to sort of say, well, am I ready now? Am I at the point where I could put a little money into a better mic or a better preamp or a better this or that?
Right.
To sort of grow to the point where now you're at, okay, now I have really, top level gear. My audio sounds great. I've been booking with this setup that I have. And I think once you're at that point, you can pretty much stay there for a while. And, like Joe said, if somebody comes back to you months later, a year later, you want to be able to record, in the same space and with the same mic and the same setup, because it happens. I mean, I've definitely gotten pickup requests and revision requests after a year or more. It's kind of strange to think about, like, we're like, really, you need me to do this line again a year later? But it happens. It definitely does. So, even if you were somebody who upgraded, I wouldn't say throw out that mic, have it as an option that you could still, pull that back up if you should need to. I've changed my templates around a little bit over the years. And when I'll still go back and have to do pickups and stuff, or just sort of like new versions of some projects that I've worked on a year ago, 2 years ago. And I'll record them with the old template that I'm no longer using, just because, that's what I recorded that with. And I don't want to have to mess around with any real technical stuff to get stuff to be smooth and sound consistent and even. So, once you're at a pretty good level and things are going well for you, I think you could probably stay there for a bit. And if you're somebody who's new and starting out, then for sure, then assess and, decide when it's the right time to put some money back into your studio and grow. Yeah, so great. So thank you so much for the question, Roger. And our final question for this week will be our business question, which comes from Cecily. And Cecily asks, I've recently read many disheartening things about some online casting sites, and I was hoping to one day join one of these sites, but now I'm beginning to think that a membership is practically useless. What's your take, and have I heard wrong? So, I'll let you take the first shot at that one.
Yeah, touchy issue for everybody, especially considering the recent acquisition of VoiceBank by Voices.com, which had everybody kind of up in arms. For me, I started on Voices.com and I expanded to a couple of other sites that I found worthwhile. I was able to start with $300 worth of equipment and a $40 a month membership and start making money. So it's not practically useless to join one of the sites and go for it. Even if you're reading X amount of copy a day, you're getting practice for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't know really, it's hard for me to assess whether somebody new can do what I did, which was basically come in with nothing. And then less than 3 years later, I was the top booking talent on both of the sites, or at least one of the top booking talent on both of the sites.
Yeah,
I don't know if that, like, because the structures of both sites have changed. I really don't know. I don't know how to make that assessment, but it's part of your business. All the parts of your business, you're going to invest time and money and energy, whether it's cold emailing, something with which I have never had any success at all. And like going to networking things and agents and stuff like that. Try it all. See what works for you.
Right.
If you can't afford the time and energy for that investment, well, it's probably not a good idea to take the risk if you're going to, take food out of your family's mouths. In my case, when I started, I had a very stable government job. So every dollar I earned with voiceover could go back into either equipment or memberships to sites or, eventually coaching or, like a sound booth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So ultimately do what's right for your business. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And sort of what you hear on this topic a lot, and I think you hear it so much because it's the correct advice, is that all of these online casting sites and, different sort of P2P sites, whatever, they're just part of your overall marketing, your overall way of getting work. They shouldn't be the sole focus of it. They can be if they, there's something that you try out and then, oh, look, these other things aren't working, but this is, and you start devoting more time and resources towards that. I think that's a good strategy. But, especially when you're starting out, you should be trying different things and seeing what works for you and what doesn't. Like, it's funny. I didn't even know that you've never had success with cold emailing, but I know a lot of people have.
Let me caveat that by saying that I never had to cold email, and I don't still have to. Okay. I've only recently started experimenting with it as part of my marketing plan.
Sure.
100% of my clients was mostly from either people contacting me directly or me pulling them off of pay-to-play sites and then becoming return clients.
Gotcha. So, and did they find you, like the people who contacted you directly, they just find your website on like a Google search or something like that?
Yeah, I might get 3 or 4 different pitches from people in any given week directly from my website.
Cool. And did you ever like look into SEO or put some conscious effort into that, or you kind of just have a good website that's up there, so if they find you, they'll like you?
Yeah, I didn't really put anything into SEO generation. No.
Okay, cool. But back to Cecily's question, I don't think it is practically useless. Like Joe, myself, I also started on voices.com and got my first jobs there and got my first repeat clients there who I still do work for today from there. Like has been mentioned, the landscape has changed and the way that these sites work has changed. So it's not exactly the same for somebody to just join the site brand new today as it was when myself or when Joe joined it. But I think it's worth a shot to try it. I would say that there's a lot of people on these casting sites. First of all, there's a lot of talent on these sites. And when somebody casts a job on them, I've casted projects on these sites too. So I could tell you when you're getting auditions, a lot of them right off the bat are just not making the cut because they're, for whatever reason, the audio quality is not there, the performance quality is not there, both are not there, or just... so a lot of them are just falling off right at the beginning. So I would say don't be one of those people, because then I think, you could probably spend your time better. So be ready skill-wise, be ready audio-wise, have nice demos, put some time into setting up your profile so that people on these sites are finding you. You're going to pay money for this membership, so get the most out of that money. Like any money you're going to spend on your business, you should want to get the most out of it. So I'd say get yourself to a point where you're ready to actually compete on those sites and not just be on them. I think that's a worthwhile point to make.
And a good point.
Yeah. But I think it's a good thing to try out. And if you're not successful after you've given it a shot, try other things and hopefully you'll find success in another marketing method. Then that's where you direct your energy and your effort. But any other points on that one, Joe?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Cool, yeah. So thank you so much for the question, Cecily. It's definitely a timely question and something that I think a lot of people struggle with throughout their career. So that is going to do it for our audience questions and for our episode. Joe, do you have any closing points about anything that we've talked about or anything that we didn't talk about on this episode?
I don't think I do.
Okay, yeah.
Don't quit your day job. Don't quit your day job until you've been doing it for a while, and you can compare the numbers.
That's a good point.
I know a lot of people like to dive into their dreams and quit everything and move to Los Angeles, but I don't know. I think the best way to be successful in Los Angeles is to be successful before you get to Los Angeles.
No, that's a great point. I am a big proponent of that myself, sort of just, having some proof of concept, if you will, before you sort of jump all in,
Definitely.
show yourself that you can get some money. That's what I did too. I worked for, I think it was a little over a full year I was still working at a full-time office job, doing voiceover stuff nights and weekends until I was generating enough money from it where I felt comfortable, taking the leap to full-time. And everybody's going to have their own sort of path and their own way that they go about it. There's no you do A, B, and C, and then you're a successful voice talent. Everybody has their own way of getting there. But I think that that's a good way. And, obviously I think you agree because you did something similar is just building it up in the time that you do have outside of your full-time work to, where you've had some proof and you have some, some confidence that this is something that can work out for you.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So Joe, this has been great. A lot of great info for people just starting out, people who have already had some success. I think people can get a lot out of this episode. I did myself. So, I just want to thank you again so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And again, a reminder, in the show notes for this episode, you guys can find links to the things that Joe and myself talked about, as well as his books, as well as you can listen to the episode there. And I would suggest you go over and check that out. And you can see that at voiceoverroadmap.com/009. And thank you again to Joe. And we will see all you guys in episode 10. Talk soon.
So long.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you again so much to Joe for coming on the show. Lots of great tips and advice there. So again, really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out the show notes, you can get them at voiceoverroadmap.com/009. And if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And if you like the show, please go ahead and leave a rating and a review on iTunes. And you can also get the show on YouTube and on the Voice Over Roadmap website. So thank you guys again so much for listening, and we'll see you next week in episode 10.